I was stirring oatmeal when the certified letter arrived that would change everything. Dylan sat across from me, his 8-year-old hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate, watching with those serious brown eyes that always seemed to see too much. "What's that, Mom?" he asked, noticing how my fingers trembled as I tore open the seal. "Just paperwork, honey." But my breath caught as I read the letterhead. Caldwell Associates. My estranged Aunt Margaret had died, leaving me her Victorian mansion in Highlands Ranch. The estimated value, $2.4 million. I read it twice, certain there'd been a mistake. Margaret and I hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since some family dispute I could barely remember. Yet here was her final gift, a lifeline for a single mother drowning in debt. "Mom, you look scared," Dylan said, setting down his mug. I glanced up to find him sketching in his notebook, something he did constantly. But this drawing made my stomach lurch. It showed a dark, ornate box with what looked like glowing red eyes, surrounded by swirling shadows. "Dylan, what's that supposed to be?" He looked at me with those two old eyes. "It's the box from the house." "What house, sweetie?" "I haven't told you about any." "The big scary house. The one with the box that makes people sleep forever." His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's waiting for us, Mom." A chill ran down my spine. "Dylan, that's just your imagination. You couldn't possibly know about." I caught myself. He didn't know about the house. I hadn't said a word. 20 minutes later, walking Dylan to the bus stop, I tried to shake off his strange reaction. Kids were imaginative. Dylan especially so. Maybe he'd overheard something on TV about haunted houses. But as the yellow bus pulled away, I couldn't forget his drawing. How had he known to draw a box? The letter only mentioned a house. That afternoon, I called Marcus Caldwell. His voice was smooth, professional, the kind that immediately put you at ease. "Mrs. Reynolds, I've been hoping to hear from you. Your aunt spoke of you often in her final months." "She did." This surprised me. "Oh, yes. She regretted the family estrangement deeply. The house is quite valuable, and she wanted it to go to someone who'd appreciate it. Could we arrange a viewing tomorrow?" I hesitated, thinking of Dylan's pale face, his whispered warnings. But $2.4 million. That was Dylan's college fund. Our future. Freedom from constant worry about bills. Tomorrow afternoon sounds perfect. That evening, Dylan drew 3 more pictures of the box, each darker than the last. In one, small figures lay sleeping around it. In another, hands reached toward it, then pulled away. The final drawing showed a woman and child standing before it, the child pulling the woman away. "Dylan, why do you keep drawing that box?" "Because it's dangerous, Mom. It makes people go to sleep forever. And once you touch it." He shuddered. "Please don't make us go to the house." I knelt beside him. "Honey, where are these ideas coming from?" "I dream about it. Every night since the letter came. I can hear it calling people. And they go to it and they never wake up." That night, after tucking Dylan in, I researched Margaret's death online. Natural causes, the obituary said. But scrolling through local news, I found something odd. 3 neighbors had died within the past year, all elderly, all peacefully in their sleep. Coincidence? Surely. But as I stared at Dylan's crumpled drawing beside my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling we were walking into something dangerous. The Victorian mansion rose before us like something from a Gothic novel, all towers and wraparound porches. Even in bright sunlight, it seemed to hold shadows. Dylan's grip on my hand tightened as we approached. "I don't like it here, Mom," he whispered. Marcus Caldwell was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit. His smile was warm as he shook my hand. "Jessica, what a pleasure. And this must be Dylan." He crouched to Dylan's level. "Hello there, young man." Dylan pressed closer to me, saying nothing. "He's shy," I explained, though Dylan was rarely shy. "Of course. Old houses can be intimidating. Marcus straightened. Shall we begin? You're going to be amazed by what Margaret left you. The interior was breathtaking. Gleaming hardwood floors, crystal chandeliers, rooms that seemed endless. Marcus guided us through the formal dining room, the library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the sunroom overlooking private gardens. 5 acres with private beach access, he explained. In today's market, comparable homes are 3 million or more. I tried to focus on his words, but Dylan's behavior disturbed me. He stayed pressed against my side, his usual curiosity completely absent. When we passed the grand staircase, he actually whimpered. "What's upstairs?" I asked. "Master's suite, guest bedrooms, Margaret's study." Marcus gestured casually. "Would you like to see?" "No." Dylan's outburst surprised us all. "Please, Mom, we shouldn't go up there." Marcus's smile flickered. Perhaps he's tired? Children often have vivid imaginations about old houses. The way he said imaginations made my skin crawl. We continued the tour, Marcus pointing out renovations, updated systems. Margaret spared no expense preserving the historical character while ensuring modern comfort. I still can't believe she left this to me. We hadn't spoken in so long. She followed your life more than you knew. Your divorce, your struggles as a single mother. She felt terrible about the family rift. Guilt washed over me. All those years of silence when Margaret had been thinking of me, caring enough to leave me everything. We ended in the living room, where an oil painting of a young Victorian woman hung above the fireplace. "That's Margaret at 20, Marcus explained. "Quite beautiful, wasn't she?" Now about estate settlement, Marcus continued, settling into a leather chair. "A few formalities. Personal items to catalog, paperwork to sign. I'd suggest handling this quickly. Property values are rising rapidly, and timing will be crucial if you decide to sell." "I haven't decided anything yet." "Of course. But may I suggest completing the inventory?" "For insurance purposes." Margaret had valuable pieces. Family heirlooms, jewelry. Dylan tugged my sleeve. When I bent down, he whispered urgently, "The box is upstairs." I can feel it waiting. "What inventory?" I asked. "Just cataloging valuable items. Tomorrow, for instance, we could go through Margaret's jewelry collection. She kept most in an antique jewelry box in her bedroom. Victorian era, very rare." At the word box, Dylan went rigid. "I should probably take time to think about this," I said slowly. "Naturally. But Jessica, may I offer friendly advice? Estates like this attract attention. The sooner we complete formalities, the sooner you can make informed decisions." There was subtle pressure in his tone that made me want to agree, just to end the conversation. But Dylan's hand was trembling in mine. "We'll be in touch. Thank you for your time." "Of course." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an ornate brass key. "This is for the jewelry box. Margaret specifically asked that you receive it personally." I took the key, its metal cold against my palm. Dylan's breathing quickened. As we walked to the car, Dylan didn't speak until we'd pulled away. Then, barely above a whisper, "Mom, promise we won't go back. Promise you won't open the box." I glanced in the rearview mirror. Marcus stood on the porch, watching until we disappeared around the corner. "It's just a jewelry box, honey." "No, it's not." Dylan's voice was flat, certain. "It's something much worse." That evening, the brass key sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation. Dylan hadn't spoken much since returning from the house, just sat drawing the same dark box over and over. I studied his latest drawing. This one showed the box in detail, ornate Victorian carving with roses and what looked like tiny skulls hidden in the design. But it was the feeling the drawing conveyed that disturbed me most. The box seemed hungry somehow. "Dylan, you've never seen this box. How do you know what it looks like?" He finally looked at me, fear clear in his 8-year-old eyes. "I see it in my dreams, Mom. every night. And in my dreams, people touch it, and then they fall asleep forever. Sweetie, it's just a jewelry box. People keep necklaces and rings in jewelry boxes. Not this one. He pushed his drawing toward me. Look closer. I studied the image again. Around the box were small figures lying still, eyes closed. And standing over them, a shadowy figure with gleaming eyes. Who's that? I pointed to the shadow figure. I don't know, but he's the one who makes people touch the box. He tells them it's safe, that there's beautiful things inside. But there aren't beautiful things, Mom. There's just sleeping forever. My phone rang. Marcus Caldwell's office. Jessica, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to check if you had questions about the property. Actually, I was wondering about my aunt's death. The obituary said natural causes, but… Oh yes, very peaceful. Margaret had been feeling under the weather for a few weeks. The doctor said it was likely her heart. She went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up. Something in his tone bothered me. Too casual, too rehearsed. Had she changed her will recently? A pause. A few times in the final months, actually. She wanted everything properly arranged. Speaking of which, have you examined the jewelry box? She was quite insistent you open it personally. Not yet. I'd encourage you not to wait. Some pieces are quite valuable and should be appraised. For insurance. Of course. I'll take care of it soon. Excellent. And Jessica? Don't let Dylan's childish fears influence your decisions. Children often have such dramatic reactions to old houses. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, bothered by his last comment. How did he know about Dylan's fears? We'd barely mentioned them. Mom? Dylan was beside me. You can't go back there tomorrow. Please. I don't remember saying anything about going back tomorrow. You're going to. I can see it. His voice dropped. And if you open that box… What, Dylan? What happens? He looked up at me with those solemn eyes. You'll fall asleep forever, just like Aunt Margaret. Just like all the others. I knelt beside him. Dylan, Aunt Margaret was old. Old people sometimes die in their sleep. But it did happen. He pointed to his drawing. The man with the silver hair, he brought the box to her house. He told her it was a gift. And when she opened it, he shuddered. Silver hair. My blood ran cold. Dylan, what else do you remember from your dreams? He has a nice voice, like when you're trying to make someone feel better. But his eyes are mean. And he carries the box from house to house, giving it to people who live alone. Marcus had silver hair. Marcus had a warm, reassuring voice. That night, I sat at my laptop searching for information about Marcus Caldwell's firm. The website looked professional enough, but something nagged at me. I searched deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 obituaries over the past year, all elderly Highlands Ranch residents. All had died peacefully in their sleep, within weeks of consulting Caldwell Associates about estate planning. All had changed their wills in the months before their deaths. I printed the obituaries, hands shaking. Margaret's was dated 3 weeks ago. The death certificate showed no history of heart problems. At 2 a.m., I finally went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about the brass key, about Marcus's insistence I open the box personally, about Dylan's drawings showing details he couldn't possibly know. What if Dylan wasn't imagining things? What if his dreams were somehow warnings? But that was impossible. Children didn't predict the future through nightmares. Except I couldn't think of another explanation. And in the morning, I would have to decide whether to trust my logical mind or my 8-year-old son's impossible dreams. I spent the night tossing and turning, Marcus's words echoing, "Don't let Dylan's childish fears influence your decisions." But the more I thought about it, the more those childish fears seemed to make terrible sense. At dawn, I found Dylan already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his sketch pad. This time, His drawing showed the Victorian mansion with multiple windows lit up, and in each window a face. All the faces had their eyes closed. More dreams? I asked, setting coffee beside him. He nodded grimly. The house is full of sleeping people, Mom. They all opened the box. After dropping Dylan at school, where he begged me not to go to the house with the sleeping people, I drove to the Denver Public Library. I needed to research Margaret's death thoroughly, away from prying eyes. What I found in the newspaper archives chilled me. Margaret's obituary was just one of 6 similar deaths in Highlands Ranch over the past 18 months. All elderly, all wealthy, all clients of Caldwell Associates. All died peacefully in their sleep after changing their wills. I cross-referenced names with property records. Each victim had owned valuable real estate that had been quietly sold within weeks of their deaths. The properties were purchased by shell companies that traced back to nowhere. The paper trail vanished. My phone buzzed. Marcus, hope you're planning to complete the inventory today. Time is of the essence. I stared at the message. How did he know I hadn't been to the house yet? Another text. The jewelry box contains remarkable pieces. Margaret was very specific about wanting you to see them personally. I scrolled through more obituaries, more property transfers, more mysterious shell companies. The pattern was clear once you knew to look. Elderly clients consulted Caldwell about estate planning. They changed their wills. They received a special gift. They died within weeks. And their estates were quietly liquidated. This wasn't just about money. This was murder. Multiple murders, disguised as natural deaths. I called the school to check on Dylan. His voice was small and strained. Mom? You didn't go to the house, did you? No, sweetie. I'm at the library. Good. Stay away from there today. In my dream last night, the silver-haired man was angry. He was carrying the box from house to house, looking for you. Dylan, how do you know so much? How can you see things that haven't happened? I don't know, Mom. I just do. Sometimes I dream about things, and then they happen. And all week, I've been dreaming about you and that box. I sat in the library's quiet reading room, surrounded by printouts and newspaper clippings. The logical part of my mind insisted this was all coincidence. But the mother in me, the part that had learned to trust Dylan's unusual insights, believed something different. Dylan had always been sensitive in ways I didn't understand. At 2, he'd cried whenever we visited my grandmother, insisting she was sick inside months before her cancer diagnosis. At 5, he'd refused to get in the car with my ex-husband the day James had his accident. He'd known things he shouldn't have known. I'd always dismissed it as coincidence, childhood intuition. But what if it wasn't? My phone rang. Marcus. Jessica, I haven't heard from you today. I trust you're planning to complete the jewelry inventory. Actually, I'm having second thoughts. Second thoughts. Concern that sounded forced. About the inheritance? Jessica, this is life-changing. Maybe I need more time to think. Time is something we don't have much of. The probate court has specific deadlines. And frankly, the property is sitting empty. That's always a risk with high-value real estate. What kind of risk? Break-ins, vandalism, insurance issues, and property taxes. Quite substantial on a home of this value. They'll need to be paid whether you keep the house or sell it. I hadn't thought about property taxes or insurance. The weight of responsibility suddenly felt crushing. I suppose I should at least complete the inventory, I heard myself saying. Excellent. I can meet you there in an hour. Actually, I'd prefer to handle this myself first. A pause. Are you certain? Some pieces are quite delicate. It would be better if someone experienced was present. I'll be careful. And the jewelry box? You'll examine its contents for the insurance appraisal. I looked at the brass key in my purse. Dylan's warnings echoed in my mind, but so did practical realities. I had student loans, credit card debt, Dylan needed stability, a future I couldn't provide on a teacher's salary. I'll take care of it. Wonderful. Call immediately when you've finished. There are papers I'll need you to sign. After hanging up, I gathered my research and headed for my car. I had to see that box for myself. Had to know if Dylan's fears were based on reality or if I was letting a child's nightmares influence a decision that could secure our future. But as I drove toward Highlands Ranch, I couldn't shake the feeling I was making a terrible mistake. The brass key felt heavy in my pocket, like a weight pulling me toward something I didn't understand. Something dangerous. Something that had been waiting for Margaret's niece to finally come home. Mrs. Nelson called just as I pulled into Dylan's school parking lot. Her voice was tight with concern. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need to speak with you about Dylan immediately. Can you come in?" I found Dylan sitting alone at a small table, surrounded by his drawings. Mrs. Nelson looked genuinely disturbed. "Mrs. Reynolds, Dylan has been drawing these all morning." She gestured to papers scattered across the table. "And he's been telling the other children some very disturbing stories." I approached the table, my heart sinking. There had to be 20 drawings, all variations of the same theme: the ornate box, people falling asleep around it, shadowy figures standing watch. But these drawings were more detailed than anything Dylan had done before. The faces around the box were clearly recognizable as elderly people. "What stories?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "He's been telling the children that someone is trying to hurt you, that there's a magic box that makes people go to sleep forever, and that you're going to open it today." Mrs. Nelson's voice dropped. "He's quite convinced this is real. It's frightening the other children." I knelt beside Dylan's chair. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying. "Dylan, talk to me. What's wrong?" "You went to the library," he said in a small voice. "You found out about the other people, didn't you? The ones who opened the box." Mrs. Nelson's eyebrows shot up. "What other people? And now you're thinking about going to the house anyway. You're going to open the box because you think you need the money." "Dylan." "But Mom, the money won't matter if you're asleep forever." And that's what happens. I looked at his latest drawing more carefully. The faces around the box weren't generic anymore. They looked like real people. Elderly people with distinct features. "Mrs. Reynolds," Mrs. Nelson said quietly, "Dylan described each of these people by name this morning. He said they all lived in the fancy neighborhood and they all opened the special box." I thought it was imagination until what? Until I looked up some of the names during lunch. "Mrs. Reynolds, these are real people. They all died in the past year. All elderly residents of Highlands Ranch." My blood turned to ice. "Dylan, how do you know these names?" "I see them in my dreams. They're all in the house now, sleeping in different rooms. And the silver-haired man visits them every day, making sure they stay asleep." His voice became urgent. "Mom, they're not really dead. They're just sleeping. But they can't wake up because of what's in the box." Mrs. Nelson sat down heavily. "Mrs. Reynolds, I think you need to explain what's going on." I looked at my son, at his teacher, at the drawings spread like evidence. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? "Dylan's been having nightmares about an inheritance I received. An old house with a jewelry box." I chose my words carefully. "He's very worried about it. It's not a nightmare," Dylan said firmly. "It's a warning. And you're not listening." Mrs. Nelson picked up one of the drawings. "Dylan, this person here." "Mrs. Garrett. You said she was the first one to open the box." Dylan nodded. "She was lonely. The silver-haired man told her the box was a gift from her lawyer. He said it would make her feel better. But when she opened it, the sleepy stuff came out, and she couldn't keep her eyes open anymore." "Sleepy stuff?" I asked. "Like smoke, but invisible. It gets in your nose and makes you so tired you can't fight it." Dylan's hands traced the air. "And once you breathe it in, you want to sleep forever. It feels good." That's the scary part. Mrs. Nelson and I exchanged glances. This was beyond anything I'd encountered as a teacher or parent. My phone buzzed. Marcus, Jessica, I'm at the house waiting for you. Where are you? I stared at the message, hands trembling. I hadn't told him I was coming today. Another text, the jewelry box needs to be opened today. It's important for the legal proceedings. Dylan grabbed my arm. Mom, don't answer him. He knows you're not coming, and now he's getting angry. How do you know that? Because in my dream, this is when he starts hunting for you. When he realizes you might not do what he wants. Dylan's grip tightened. He's not really a lawyer, Mom. He's something much worse. Mrs. Nelson was reading over my shoulder. Mrs. Reynolds, how does he know you're supposed to be there if you didn't tell him you were coming? A chill ran down my spine. She was right. My phone rang. Marcus's name on the screen. Don't answer it, Dylan whispered. Please, Mom, don't let him know where we are. I looked at my son's terrified face, at Mrs. Nelson's concerned expression, at the drawing spread like evidence of crimes. And for the first time since receiving that letter, I truly listened to my child. I turned off my phone. Mrs. Reynolds, Mrs. Nelson said quietly, I think we need to call the police. Mrs. Nelson moved quickly, locking her classroom door and pulling down window shades. Is there another way out? I whispered. Fire exit at the end of the hall. But Mrs. Reynolds, if this man is as dangerous as Dylan believes. He is, Dylan said with absolute certainty. In my dreams, when people try to run away, he always finds them. Someone knocked on the classroom door. Jessica? Marcus's voice was muffled, but unmistakable. I know you're in there. We really need to talk about Margaret's inheritance. Dylan grabbed my hand, his fingers ice cold. Don't answer him, Mom. Jessica, I spoke with the office. They said you're here with Dylan. I think there's been some confusion about the estate. Mrs. Nelson motioned us to the back of the classroom. In the supply closet, she whispered, the police are on their way. But there's something you need to know. I looked up Marcus Caldwell during lunch. He's not a registered attorney in Colorado. My blood ran cold. What? I checked the State Bar Association database. No license. No record of him ever practicing law. The knocking became more insistent. Jessica, I understand you've been asking questions about Margaret's death. About the other residents who've passed away recently. I can explain everything. Dylan's grip tightened. He's lying, Mom. He doesn't want to explain. He wants you to come with him. I knew I had to respond, had to buy time. Marcus, I appreciate your concern, but I've decided to postpone the inventory indefinitely. A pause. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Gone was the warm, professional demeanor. I'm afraid that's not possible, Jessica. The terms of Margaret's will are quite specific. The inheritance must be claimed within 48 hours, or it reverts to the state. 48 hours? You never mentioned that before. Didn't I? Well, time has a way of slipping by. It's been 46 hours since Margaret's death, Jessica. If you don't complete the inventory today, you'll lose everything. My mind raced. Something was wrong with his timeline. Margaret had died 3 weeks ago, not 2 days ago. Dylan tugged my sleeve. Mom, he's trying to trick you. Aunt Margaret didn't die 2 days ago. He was right. The dates didn't add up. Marcus was lying. I think I need to consult with my own lawyer, I called out. The silence that followed was chilling. When Marcus spoke again, all pretense was gone. Jessica, you're making this much harder than it needs to be. Both for you and for Dylan. Are you threatening my son? I'm stating a fact. Children without parents become wards of the state. And sometimes, sad accidents happen to children in foster care. Dylan's face went white. Mom, we need to get out of here. Now. Mrs. Nelson was already moving, gathering her purse and car keys. But as we reached the back of the classroom, Dylan suddenly stopped. Wait, listen. We all froze. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets. He didn't come alone, Dylan whispered. Despite everything, I felt something harden inside me, a fierce protectiveness I didn't know I possessed. Mrs. Nelson, is there a way to the basement? Service stairs by the janitor's closet. But why? Because we're not running anymore. We're going to end this. I pulled up the photos I'd taken at the library, the research about the other deaths. I forwarded them to my email, uploaded them to cloud storage, and sent copies to 3 different people. Then I did something that probably saved our lives. I called 911, put the phone on speaker, and left the line open. This is Jessica Reynolds at Brookside Elementary. There's a man named Marcus Caldwell threatening me and my son. He's been posing as a lawyer, and I believe he's murdered several elderly people in Highlands Ranch. I gave the dispatcher our exact location, described Marcus, and then made sure my voice was loud enough for him to hear through the door. The police have copies of all my research about the deaths. If anything happens to me or my son, Detective Rachel Torres at the Denver PD has instructions to investigate Marcus Caldwell immediately. The silence from the hallway was deafening. Then I heard the sound of the classroom door being unlocked. Mom, Dylan whispered, this is when we have to trust each other completely. I grabbed Dylan's hand, and we ran for the basement. Behind us, I heard Marcus's voice, no longer pretending to be friendly. Find them. We end this today. The basement was a maze of storage rooms and mechanical equipment. Dylan led the way as if he'd been there before, navigating through stacks of old desks and boxes. This way, Mom, he whispered, pulling me toward a narrow corridor. Dylan, how do you know where you're going? I've been dreaming about this place too. We could hear footsteps above us, voices calling our names. Dylan stopped in front of an old janitor's office. Inside, I could see filing cabinets covered in dust. In here, Mom. Dylan, this is just a storage closet. Look closer. He pushed open the door. The room extended back into darkness, and Dylan pointed to the back wall. Mom, do you see it? What I'd taken for a dirty section of wall was actually a hidden door, painted over so many times it was almost invisible. 10-1763, Dylan said suddenly. What? The code. I punched in the numbers, not really believing it would work. The lock clicked open. Behind the door was a small room that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and in the center sat an old desk covered with papers. Dylan, why are we here? Because the truth is here, Mom. The truth about why he chose Aunt Margaret. Why he chose you. I moved to the desk, brushing dust off the papers. What I saw made my heart skip. These weren't school records. They were property documents, genealogy charts, lists of names with addresses and financial information. And at the top of one list, Bradley Family Trust beneficiaries. Dylan, this is about the Bradley Family Trust. He pointed to a framed photograph on the desk. It showed Mrs. Nelson shaking hands with an elderly woman in front of the Victorian mansion. It was Margaret. I turned the frame over. Written in faded ink, Linda Nelson, private investigator. Margaret Bradley, client. Case closed successfully, 1995. Mrs. Nelson is a private investigator? She was. She retired and became a teacher. But she never forgot about the Bradley case. I began reading through the files. What I found was a detailed investigation into the Bradley Family Trust, a fortune that had been accumulating for over a century. The trust was worth far more than just the mansion. There were investments, properties, accounts in several countries. The total value was staggering, over $50 million. And according to the documents, Margaret Bradley had been the last living beneficiary. Upon her death, the fortune would pass to her closest living relative, me. But there was more. I found records showing that several people over the years had attempted to fraudulently claim the Bradley inheritance. They'd all died under mysterious circumstances. Marcus has been planning this for a long time, I whispered. Dylan had found another file containing photographs, surveillance reports, and detailed financial records. It was an investigation into Marcus Caldwell and what appeared to be an entire organization dedicated to inheritance fraud. The file showed that Marcus worked with a network of associates who targeted elderly people with valuable estates. But the Bradley Trust was different. It couldn't be stolen through forged documents. The inheritance was protected by legal safeguards that required the rightful heir to claim it personally. That's why Marcus needed me alive, at least initially. I had to voluntarily open the jewelry box and claim the inheritance. Only then could he eliminate me and claim the fortune. The jewelry box, I said suddenly. Dylan, what's really in it? Death, Mom. Just like I've been telling you. I found the answer in Mrs. Nelson's files. The jewelry box had been modified decades ago as a security measure. It was designed to release a gas when opened, originally a harmless marking agent to catch thieves. But someone had replaced the harmless gas with something lethal. Footsteps echoed in the basement above us. They'd found our trail. Mom, we have to go. But first, you need to take this. Dylan handed me a small device from the desk drawer. It looked like a thumb drive. What is it? Everything, Mom. All of Mrs. Nelson's evidence. She said if anything happened to her, you'd need this to stop him. If anything happened to her? Dylan, where is Mrs. Nelson now? His face fell. She went to the house, Mom. She went to make sure Marcus couldn't hurt anyone else with that box. My blood ran cold. She went to the mansion? Alone. She said someone had to stop him from using it on other people. She said the only way to end this was to destroy the box. I pocketed the thumb drive. Mrs. Nelson had sacrificed herself to give us a chance. The least I could do was make sure her evidence reached the right people. Come on, Dylan. We're not running anymore. We're going to finish what Mrs. Nelson started. Because suddenly I understood what needed to be done. Marcus needed me to open that box to legitimize his claim to the inheritance. But what he didn't know was that I'd already legitimized my claim just by being here. The box wasn't the key to the inheritance. It was a trap. And now that I knew the truth, it was time to spring a trap of our own. We emerged from the basement into chaos. Police cars surrounded the school, red and blue lights flashing through windows. I could hear Marcus's voice from the main hallway, still trying to maintain his facade. I'm simply trying to help Mrs. Reynolds with a legal matter. Dylan and I crept through service corridors toward the main office. I needed the police to understand what was happening before Marcus convinced them I was imagining conspiracies. Mom, Dylan whispered, the police officer talking to him. She's different from the others. I peered around the corner. A woman in plainclothes was speaking with Marcus, her body language suggesting she wasn't buying his story. That's Detective Torres, Dylan said with certainty. How do you know her name? Mrs. Nelson told me about her. She's the one person who believed Mrs. Nelson's investigation. Detective Torres seemed to sense our presence. She looked in our direction, and I made the decision to trust Dylan's judgment. I stepped out of hiding, the thumb drive clutched in my hand. Detective Torres? I'm Jessica Reynolds. I have evidence about Marcus Caldwell. Marcus's head snapped toward me, his expression finally cracking. For just a moment, I saw something cold and dangerous in his eyes. Jessica, he said smoothly, thank goodness you're safe. Mrs. Reynolds, Detective Torres said, moving between Marcus and me, tell me exactly what's been happening. I held up the thumb drive. Marcus Caldwell is not a lawyer. He's been murdering elderly people in Highlands Ranch and stealing their estates. This drive contains proof of everything. Marcus laughed, the sound chilling. Detective, This woman has been under enormous stress since inheriting her aunt's property. Her son has been having disturbing nightmares, and I'm afraid she's been influenced by his childish fears. Childish fears that named 6 real victims before we knew they were dead, I said firmly. Detective, my son drew pictures of people he'd never met, new details about deaths that hadn't been reported. Marcus has been watching us, tracking us, threatening us. Detective Torres held out her hand. May I see that drive? I handed it over. Marcus's charming mask was slipping. Detective Marcus said, his voice taking on a harder edge, I really must insist we handle this privately. There are legal confidentialities. I'm sure there are, Detective Torres replied dryly. Mrs. Reynolds, I need you and Dylan to come with me. For your safety. That won't be necessary, Marcus said, stepping closer. Jessica and I have business to conclude. Actually, Mr. Caldwell, I'm afraid it can. Detective Torres's hand moved to her weapon. Because according to the Colorado State Bar Association, you're not licensed to practice law in the state. Marcus's facade finally shattered. Detective, I think you're making a serious mistake. I have associates who won't be pleased. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. I felt Dylan tense beside me. Mom, his friends are coming. Detective Torres was already speaking into her radio. This is Torres. I need backup at Brookside Elementary immediately. Multiple suspects, potentially armed. Through the windows, I could see movement in the parking lot. 3 men in dark suits were approaching. Jessica, Marcus said, all pretense gone, you're going to come with me. You're going to complete the estate inventory, and you're going to open that jewelry box. Because if you don't, Dylan will have a very unfortunate accident. Over my dead body, I said. Marcus smiled coldly. If necessary. Detective Torres drew her weapon. That's enough. Mr. Caldwell, you're under arrest. But Marcus spoke into a device clipped to his collar. Initiate Plan B. The Reynolds woman has been compromised. The lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in eerie red. I heard glass breaking, windows being smashed. Mom, Dylan whispered urgently, they're coming in from all sides. This is the part where we have to be smart. Detective Torres was coordinating with other officers, but I could hear confusion in their radio responses. Dylan, in your dreams, what do we do now? We go where they don't expect us to go. Where? Back to Mrs. Nelson's classroom. She left something there for us. Against every instinct, I trusted my son. While Detective Torres was distracted, Dylan and I slipped away through the darkened hallways. The classroom was empty, but Dylan went immediately to the teacher's desk. From the bottom drawer, he pulled out what looked like an old walkie-talkie. Mrs. Nelson left this for us. She said if everything went wrong, we could use it to talk to her. I took the radio. Mrs. Nelson? Can you hear me? Static, then a familiar voice. Jessica? Thank goodness. Are you safe? For now. Mrs. Nelson, why didn't you tell me who you really were? Because I needed you to discover the truth naturally. If I'd simply told you, Marcus would have known I was involved. Through the static, I could hear sounds in the background. Breaking glass. Heavy footsteps. Mrs. Nelson, where are you? I'm in the mansion. In Margaret's study. I've found the real jewelry box, Jessica. The one Marcus has been using is a replica. What inheritance? The real inheritance isn't in the box. The box is the inheritance. It's made of platinum and embedded with rare gems. It's worth millions. But more importantly, inside are the real trust documents proving your claim to the entire Bradley fortune. How much? $52 million, Jessica. In trusts, properties, and investments that have been growing for over a century. My head spun. No wonder Marcus had been killing people. But why didn't Margaret tell me? Because she knew Marcus was watching. She knew he'd been killing Bradleys for years. She pretended to be harmless while secretly documenting everything. Through the window, I could see flashlights moving through the school grounds. Mrs. Nelson, how do we end this? You have to come to the mansion, Jessica. You have to claim your inheritance properly. But not the way Marcus wants. There's a secret entrance through the basement. Dylan knows the way. I looked at my son. Dylan, do you know about a secret entrance? He nodded solemnly. Mrs. Nelson showed me. But Mom, it's dangerous. He has men watching all around the house. Detective Torres's voice echoed through the halls. Jessica. Dylan, where are you? But I knew safety was an illusion. Marcus would never stop hunting us. The only way to end this was to face him on our terms. Mrs. Nelson, I said into the radio, we're coming. Tell us what to do. We slipped out through the fire exit into chaos. Police cars, ambulances, and unmarked vehicles created a maze of flashing lights and shadows. Dylan pulled me toward the tree line bordering the school property. This way, Mom. Mrs. Nelson's car is hidden in the woods. We found the car exactly where Dylan said, a Honda Accord tucked behind pine trees, keys under the floor mat. A note was attached. Follow the GPS, trust Dylan. Linda. The GPS was programmed with a route through back roads I didn't recognize. Dylan sat calmly beside me, hands folded in his lap. Dylan, these dreams of yours, when did they really start? The night after you got the letter. But Mom, they're not exactly dreams. What do you mean? Mrs. Nelson explained it to me. She said some people are sensitive to bad things that are going to happen. She said I inherited it from you. From me? Dylan, I've never had prophetic dreams. You used to. When you were little. You used to dream about Grandpa before he died, about the car accident, about Grandma getting sick. But you learned to ignore it. I thought back to my childhood, to dreams I dismissed as coincidences. Dreams about my father's heart attack 2 weeks before it happened. Dreams about my grandmother's cancer months before diagnosis. Mrs. Nelson said the sensitivity can skip generations, but it usually comes back when it's needed most, Dylan continued. She said that's why I could see what he was planning. We were driving through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods now, approaching Highlands Ranch. But instead of the main entrance, the GPS directed us down a service road. There, Dylan pointed. That's where we get out. I saw it, a maintenance gate in the fence, partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. Dylan led me through a gap in the fence into the wooded area behind the mansion. This is the secret way Mrs. Nelson found. Aunt Margaret built it during World War II. The path was barely visible, leading to what looked like a storm cellar built into the hillside behind the Victorian mansion. My phone buzzed. Marcus, Jessica, I know you're here. You can't keep running forever. I turned off my phone. Dylan hesitated before opening the cellar door. Mom, once we go inside, everything changes. There's no going back. What do you mean? Mrs. Nelson has been planning this for a long time. She's been waiting for someone like you to help her stop Marcus forever. Someone like me? Someone who would fight for their child. Someone who wouldn't give up. We descended into the cellar. It wasn't just storage, it was a sophisticated tunnel with electric lighting leading directly to the mansion's basement. At the end was a heavy wooden door. Dylan pressed his ear against it. Mrs. Nelson is on the other side, but so are the others. I could hear voices muffled by thick walls. Marcus's voice, angry and frustrated. Dylan pushed open the door, and we emerged into the mansion's basement. What caught my attention were photographs covering one wall. Pictures of the Bradley family going back generations. And in the center, a recent photo of Margaret with a younger woman. Mrs. Nelson. They weren't just investigator and client, I whispered. More than friends, Mom. Look. Dylan pointed to another photograph. Margaret and Mrs. Nelson, both much younger, in wedding dresses, standing together and laughing. Margaret had been Mrs. Nelson's partner. That's why she cared so much, Dylan said quietly. He killed the person she loved most. Everything clicked. Mrs. Nelson's dedication, her decision to become a teacher at Dylan's school, her preparation for this moment. She hadn't just been trying to stop a criminal. She'd been trying to get justice for Margaret's murder. A crash from upstairs interrupted my thoughts. Marcus shouting. "They're breaking into the study," Dylan said. "Mrs. Nelson needs help." I looked at my son, so small and serious, trusting me to do the right thing. "Dylan, I need you to call Detective Torres and tell her exactly where we are." "What about you, Mom?" "I'm going upstairs." "Mom, no." "In my dreams." "In your dreams? Do we save Mrs. Nelson?" Dylan smiled. "Yeah, we do." "Then let's go save her." We climbed the narrow stairs to the main floor. The mansion was now a battleground. Furniture overturned, windows broken, Marcus's voice growing frustrated. "Where is it, Linda? Where's the real box?" Mrs. Nelson's voice was calm, defiant. "You killed her, Marcus. You killed Margaret for money you'll never see. I've killed 6 people for this inheritance." "What's 2 more?" We reached the second floor. The study door was barricaded, but I could see Marcus and 2 men trying to break it down. I noticed the fire alarm on the wall. I pulled it. The mansion filled with deafening alarm sounds. Emergency lights flashed. And from the distance, I could hear sirens. Marcus spun around, eyes wild. When he saw me, his face twisted with rage. "You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've stopped you." "No, you've signed your death warrant." But before Marcus could move, the front door exploded inward. Detective Torres entered with a tactical team, weapons drawn. Denver police. Everyone on the ground. Marcus's associates immediately surrendered, but Marcus stood frozen, staring at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Jessica. The Bradley fortune is mine." "No," said a voice from the study. The door opened, and Mrs. Nelson emerged, carrying an ornate jewelry box. "The Bradley fortune goes to its rightful heir." She walked directly to me and placed the box in my hands. "This is yours, Jessica. It always has been." The box was heavier than I'd expected. I could feel the smooth coldness of precious metals and stones. But more than that, I could feel the weight of generations. Marcus made one last desperate lunge, but Detective Torres and her team were faster. He was on the ground in handcuffs before he could take 2 steps. "Marcus Caldwell, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges." As police led Marcus away, he looked over his shoulder one last time. "You think you've won? You have no idea how deep this goes." Detective Torres cut him off. "Save it for your lawyer. Your real lawyer this time." Mrs. Nelson put her arm around Dylan, who was looking up at her with obvious affection. "You did very well, Dylan. Your mother should be proud." "She is," I said, pulling my son close. "But Mrs. Nelson, I still don't understand everything, because I've been watching Marcus for 8 years. Ever since he killed his first victim. You see, he didn't start with Margaret." "Who?" Mrs. Nelson's eyes filled with tears. "My mother." The final piece fell into place. Mrs. Nelson hadn't just been investigating murders. She'd been hunting the man who killed her mother and her partner. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. Justice has been served. And the Bradley fortune will go to someone who deserves it." I looked down at the jewelry box in my hands, then at Dylan, then at Detective Torres finishing the arrests. "What happens now?" Mrs. Nelson smiled. "Now you live the life Margaret wanted for you. A life free from fear, free from want. A life where Dylan can grow up safe and happy." 6 months later, I stood in the same Victorian mansion, but everything felt different. Sunlight streamed through windows that had been dark with shadows. The rooms we'd toured in fear now rang with Dylan's laughter as he played in the garden we'd planted together. Mrs. Nelson Linda visited for dinner every Sunday. She'd officially retired from teaching, but she still helped me understand the complexities of managing the Bradley Trust. The $52 million felt surreal, but Linda insisted Margaret would have wanted me to use it wisely. The foundation is doing incredible work, Linda said, setting down her teacup. We were sitting on the front porch, watching Dylan chase fireflies in the twilight. The Margaret Bradley Foundation for Elder Protection had been my first priority. Using the Trust's resources, we'd established programs to protect elderly people from financial fraud, to investigate suspicious deaths in care facilities, and to support victims' families. Marcus was serving life in prison without parole. His network had been dismantled, revealing dozens of victims across multiple states. Detective Torres Rachel had become not just our protector, but our friend. She'd joined the Foundation's board, bringing her law enforcement expertise to our mission. "How's Dylan adjusting?" Linda asked, watching him carefully collect fireflies in a jar before releasing them. "He still has the dreams sometimes," I said. "But they're different now. Happier. He dreams about people being saved, about families staying together." Dylan had kept his sensitivity, but we'd learned to see it as a gift rather than a burden. Mrs. Chin, his new teacher at the private school he now attended, encouraged him to draw his dreams and talk about them openly. The nightmares about danger had faded, replaced by dreams that sometimes warned of smaller troubles: a friend getting sick, a lost pet that needed finding. "Mom," Dylan called from the garden. "Come see what I found." I walked to where he was kneeling beside the old rose bushes Margaret had planted years ago. Hidden beneath the overgrowth was a small stone marker with an inscription, "For Linda, my heart's true home." "And Margaret loved Mrs. Nelson very much, didn't she?" Dylan asked. "Yes, honey, very much." Linda joined us, tears in her eyes as she read the inscription. She had this made for our 5th anniversary. I never knew where she'd put it. That night, after Linda had gone home and Dylan was asleep, I sat in Margaret's study, now my study, reading her journals. She'd left detailed accounts of her life with Linda, their happiness together, and her growing fear as she realized Marcus was targeting the family fortune. She'd known she was going to die. But she'd also known that by leaving everything to me, she was giving Linda the ally she needed to finally stop Marcus. "Thank you," I whispered to the portrait of young Margaret hanging above the fireplace. As if in response, a gentle breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the scent of roses from the garden. Dylan appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mom?" "I had a dream." For a moment, my heart clenched with the old fear. "What kind of dream, sweetie?" He smiled. "A good one. I dreamed about a lady with kind eyes who said thank you. She said she's happy we're living in her house and taking care of Mrs. Nelson." I pulled him onto my lap, holding him close. "That sounds like a wonderful dream." It was. "And Mom?" "I dreamed about Daddy too." My ex-husband James had tried to contest the inheritance, claiming he deserved support for Dylan. The legal team Linda had recommended made short work of his claims, but I'd agreed to supervised visits if James cleaned up his act. "What about Daddy?" "I dreamed he got a job and a new apartment, and that he's trying to be better." Dylan's dreams about his father had proven accurate so far. James was attending counseling, had found steady work, and was slowly rebuilding a relationship with his son. Not the family I'd once imagined, but a healthier one for all of us. "That's nice, honey. Do you like living here?" Dylan nodded emphatically. "I love it." "But Mom..." "Yes. In my dream, the kind lady said this is just the beginning. She said our family is going to help lots more people." I looked around the study, at Margaret's books, at the trust documents that had made all of this possible, at the foundation reports showing lives already saved. "I think she's right, Dylan. I think this is just the beginning." He yawned, settling more comfortably in my lap. Good. I like helping people. And I like that the scary dreams stopped. They stopped because we're safe now. Because we stood up to the bad man and won. We did, didn't we? Dylan smiled sleepily. Mrs. Nelson says I'm brave like you. You're the bravest boy I know. You saved us both. We saved each other, Mom. As I carried Dylan upstairs to bed, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. A letter that had seemed like salvation but hid the threat of death. A son whose impossible dreams had kept us both alive. A teacher who was really a detective, fighting the longest case of her career. An inheritance that was never about money but about justice. I tucked Dylan into his bed, a room that overlooked the garden where we'd planted new flowers over Margaret's grave. Linda visited her every day, and sometimes Dylan and I joined her. Mom, Dylan mumbled as I turned off the light. Yes, honey. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky. As I closed his door and headed back downstairs, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The Victorian mansion that had once seemed so threatening was now truly home. The fortune I'd inherited came with responsibility, but also the freedom to live without fear. And sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, I could swear I heard soft laughter from the garden. Margaret and Linda, together again in whatever comes after, knowing that justice had been served and love had triumphed. Dylan was right. This was just the beginning. Our family's story of survival had become a story of hope for others. The foundation grew stronger every month, Linda's investigations more thorough, Rachel's protective network more extensive. And somewhere in Colorado, elderly people slept safely in their beds, protected by the legacy of a woman who loved deeply, died bravely, and trusted the right people to carry on her fight. Margaret Bradley had given us more than money. She'd given us purpose. And Dylan's dreams, once filled with warnings of death, now sparkled with visions of life, new helping hands reaching out, families staying together, and love conquering fear. Every single time.